Hi, and welcome to PowerViews. I'm Dan McDade, your host and president of PointClear. My guest today is Dave Stein. Dave is a former sales rep, sales manager, VP of sales, competitive sales strategist, consultant, and sales trainer. And he has worked in 26 countries with companies ranging from startups to the Fortune 10. Dave is now CEO and founder of ES Research Group. ESR assists sales training buyers in selecting the right providers for the right reasons. They do that by assessing a client's selling strengths and challenges, defining requirements, writing and publishing RFPs, and managing the entire vendor evaluation and selection process. They have over 600 sales training firms in their database. In addition to his blog, Dave writes a regular sales training column for Sales and Marketing Management magazine, and he also sits on their advisory board. Dave wrote How Winners Sell with a first edition in 2002 and a second edition in 2004. Dave, welcome to PowerViews.
Well, thanks for having me, Dan. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you allowing time today. Hey, I just wanted to start out with just a general question, and that is, what changes have you seen in sales training during the past few years, and what do you see as some of the upcoming trends?
Well, there's quite a lot going on. I think the industry was stagnant for a number of years, but if we break this down into a couple of areas, the first is that there has been a fair amount of consolidation. There are a number of companies that have acquired others. Some examples: Miller Heiman acquiring Channel Enablers, a company out of Australia that works with companies that sell through resellers. And more recently, Corporate Visions, first they acquired Whiteboard Selling, and they more recently acquired Bay Group International. So not only has that consolidation been going on, but we know that there's more coming in the latter part of 2013 into 2014. Some other things going on here as well as far as content, that sales training content. There's been a lot of work around value messaging that's been going on for numbers of years, specifically targeting individual persona within customer organizations, managing the more and more challenging, difficult relationship with strategic buyers. Lots of large companies have procurement or sourcing or purchasing, buying organizations, and these have gotten very, very powerful since, pretty much since the economic crisis in 2008. Channel management, I mentioned, is a big thing now, with companies trying to reduce their direct costs by selling through resellers, and that's not only in technology but in other industries as well. As far as delivery is concerned, there's a fair amount of work that's gone on as far as virtual delivery. Of course, that means over the internet, and it's a combination of live training, as you'd get on a webinar, and software as a service, on-demand training as well. And as far as some of the upcoming trends, there's no doubt in anybody's mind, with the advent of the Challenger sale, that selling around insights into the customer's organization is something that is growing. Not only the guys from the Challenger, corporate executive board, but Richardson, Rain Group, other organizations have focused on that as well. So that kind of leads us into what we talk about here at ESR as thought leadership selling, and that is salespeople having insights into their customer's business, and most importantly, the ability to talk about a very specific contribution that their solution, products or services, is going to make to the customer's business plan. And this is something that's been going on for 30 years, believe it or not, but we know that more work is going to happen over the next few years as buyers become tougher, and they're going to be much, much more critical in terms of investing in any types of solutions to help their business.
Well, that's a great segue to my next question. This is, when sales training fails, what typically happens? Why does it fail?
Well, it's so interesting. The market moves so fast. Markets move so fast, and those companies that we sell to, whether we're selling to manufacturing companies or professional services firms, they have to move fast to satisfy the needs of their customers. So we have to move fast to meet their requirements as well. And when we look at post-mortems or autopsies of failed sales training initiatives, and that's kind of part of what we do for a living, we see a number of things. And the first that I was leading to is a lack of a complete understanding of the customer, and that is how that selling company's customer operates how they buy, what their buying trends are, what their preferences are, what their alternatives are. So if I am CEO of a company that sells stuff, if I think I know my customer and I know how they buy from me, but I'm having trouble making my number, first place to start is really digging in and getting inside that customer's head and figuring out what does it take to successfully sell to that customer. So once I understand that, then I have to look at what kind of job are my salespeople doing meeting those customer buying requirements. And what we've found is somewhere between 20 and 33% of business-to-business salespeople are not suited for the jobs that they're in. They don't have the traits, the DNA, the competencies to be able to make their numbers consistently. So that we see as the second biggest problem. And the third is that these initiatives are tactical, the sales training initiatives. A lot of people have heard me say many times, sales training is not a 2-hour event with a motivational speaker at the Holiday Inn at Newark Airport once a year. Okay, that is not sales training. Sales training is strategic. It's supported with appropriate funding, appropriate top-level sponsorship, and it's something that needs to permeate through the whole selling organization. And the final one is not matching a company's training requirements to the various sales training providers. So you mentioned a few moments ago we have about 600, a little more than 600 sales trainers in our database. That's just in North America, and it becomes very, very difficult for a company looking for sales training to find the right match. And it's not only that the sales training company has the right content to meet the requirements for me to sell more effectively to my customers, but they have to have the right culture, the right philosophy, the right people, and more and more people, more and more sales training buyers seem to be making mistakes, being distracted by whomever it is that's published the latest book or done the last webinar. So those are the big challenges that we see in sales training these days.
There's a lot of controversy now between some of these sales training methodologies that makes it kind of interesting. You know, one of the things that, you know, even if you have the best sales training, companies shoot themselves in the foot with the lack of alignment between marketing and sales, and a lot of that lack of a marketing alignment or marketing and sales alignment has to do with the definition of a lead. How do you define a lead?
Well, yeah, for a second before I do that, let me just go back and tell another quick story. It was more than 20 years ago. It might have been 22 years ago, long before we had webinars and the kind of things, certainly video interviews like we're doing right now. I remember receiving a snail mail invitation to an event, a 2-hour event one morning in New York City. I lived in New York State at that point, and the title of it was Sales and Marketing Alignment. How to get sales and marketing to work together. So that was 22 years ago, and we're still batting that one around as well. So you
get the prize for the oldest mention, though.
It's really something. I wish I had saved that. I mean, it would really be valuable. I could probably sell it on eBay for as much as $2 or $3.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But when it comes down to defining a lead, so where I was headed with that story is that lead has to be defined in a way collaboratively among those who work for marketing and those who work for sales. And I just last week spoke at a conference in Boston. There's an organization called ITSMA, and they're a marketing firm, and they had just some very, very knowledgeable and experienced presenters. And there was quite a lot of discussion about what is a lead. And they talked about MQLs, SALs, SQLs, marketing qualified leads, sales accepted leads, sales qualified leads. And I had certainly thought about this quite a lot before last week, but it now became much, much clearer to me that what is a lead for one company may not be a lead for another, the same way qualification for one company is probably not the same same list of criteria as for another. So, you know, if you take a look at the basic BANT, B-A-N-T, buyer, authority, need, and time frame, you know, you could tell tell that to some companies, and they'll say, well, we don't have to have a budget in place. In fact, our product is leading edge. Nobody's ever seen it before. It's the new iPod, and people didn't have budgets for iPods. So therefore, if you ask the question about whether there's a budget, of course the answer is going to be no. We have to work with our buying organization to create a budget or to divert funds from somewhere else. So the point here is that what is a lead is really something that has to be collaborated upon and negotiated upon between sales and marketing. And one of the speakers last week even talked about SLAs, service level agreements, where marketing would commit to sales that they would deliver a certain number of leads at certain levels for those to be not only sales accepted leads, but be converted to sales qualified leads, a certain number per week, per quarter, per month, whatever it happens to be. So I guess to sum that up, once sales signs off and says, according to our published criteria, whether it's 3 points or 10 points, or hopefully it's not 30, but however number it is, this suspect, this person, this company, this email address is qualified according to the definition that we collaborated upon and negotiated upon. So I don't want anybody to hide behind a rock here and say, Stein wouldn't commit. I'm committing a lot here, but what I'm saying is it's a lead is in the eye of the beholder, and that is the selling company.
Well, one of the things I recommend, because the thing you're describing originated with the Serious Decisions demand waterfall.
Yes.
And one of the things I recommend is that if there's a marketing qualified lead that does not become sales accepted for some reason, and those reasons could be anything from it didn't meet the qualification criteria to, what we call non-intuitive reasons. A non-intuitive reason is I called them twice and they didn't call me back, so they must not have been interested.
Right.
But you put a judicial branch in at that place so that anything that does not forward to a sales accepted lead becomes subject to review of the judicial branch. And basically the judiciary is responsible for saying, yes, it did meet the lead criteria and it wasn't effectively followed up, or it didn't meet the lead criteria, let's fix that problem. Because otherwise what's going to happen is a perpetuation of 22 years of marketing basically throwing stuff over the fence, sales not picking it up, not providing visibility. One of the reasons I say that they don't provide visibility is that if you're in an organization that let's say 20 to 29% of the deals or the sales qualified leads actually close, what sales rep wants to sign up for losing 4 out of 5 times and having to answer questions about what's going on with this deal? Why did you lose that deal?
Right.
So there's some emotional reasons or psychological reasons why sales does what they do, which is they don't provide visibility because they don't want to answer all the questions and they don't want to lose 4 out of 5 times. So it's an interesting conundrum, but I think if companies would put this judicial branch in place, they would find that they would close some of those loops. One of your recent blogs, and we talked about this just a couple minutes ago, was called Getting B2B Sales Reps to Be More Social. And you referred to a couple of companies like Richardson and Sales Performance International, the solution selling company, as examples of organizations that really get it. How much time do you feel like sales executives should be social selling right now versus other activities?
That's a good question, and so let me at least start by saying that the listeners or the viewers of this interview should understand that there are some industries that are much further behind others regarding being sold to or using social selling or social buying. Some of the financial services industries, for example, we have clients in those industries who are strictly regulated, and there's a great deal of compliance to regulations and rules that are not as new as some of the social media or social networking platforms. But with that aside, it really does depend on the industries. I mean, we see high tech, of course, I shouldn't say of course, but leading the pack as they tend to do in some areas as far as the amount of buying that is done through the social selling paradigm or environment. There are other kinds of industries, for example, heavy equipment manufacturing, where there's a much lower degree of dependence on social contact, social media, social networking, as far as finding salespeople on the part of the buyer or the sellers finding potential buyers. But certainly in terms of percentage of one's time, it's more a question of what are are the things that you have to do every week, the must-dos, and devoting the time to follow up on those. For example, monitoring and contributing to the LinkedIn groups that are most closely related to the industry that you're selling into, not your industry, but the industry you're selling into, observing who's asking questions, who's providing responses, gathering competitive information, learning about potential new buyers, making new contacts. You kind of have to do that stuff, and what we want to do is be effective in using social media, but there's also an element of being efficient as well. We don't want a salesperson spending half of each of 5 or 6 days a week banging on the keyboard or whatever it is that they're doing, swiping with their thumbs the iPad. There are things that have to be done, and depending on the industry, could be anywhere from 2 to 4 hours a week. And in some industries, for some salespeople who may have closed out the year and they're looking to build up a new pipeline for the new year, it could be twice as many hours as that for that first month or 2 months beginning a new year, in some cases beginning a new quarter. But single-digit numbers a week could be, we'll say mid-single-digit numbers a week, less than 5, we think is suspect because of the amount of activity that goes on through social media these days.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, you mentioned, it's hard to believe to me we're turning the corner here from 2013 to 2014. What do you think sales and marketing executives need to be most concerned with as they head into the new year?
Well, yeah, I talked earlier about 20 to 33% of salespeople not being suited for their jobs, and you talked about salespeople being afraid to accept too many leads. So there's a question here as to the ability, capability, attitudes, and behaviors of salespeople. And I'll suggest that probably the same thing takes place on the marketing side, although it may not be as visible. Individual marketing staff people don't have the same degree of exposure as individual salespeople. But if I had one message, our most important message to deliver to sales and marketing executives starting now, but certainly starting January 1st, it would be commit to yourselves, your team, and your company never to hire another person that can't get the job done. The job is tough enough. It's not going to get easier. It's going to get harder as the years go on. And if you don't have a hiring process, one that's proven, you don't have to create one. There are plenty of them out there. You can read about it on the internet. You can hire a consultant. But what we want to make sure, rather than 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 4 salespeople working out, we want it to be the other way around, so that it's 4 out of 5 or 3 out of 4 working out. When I say working out, I mean delivering at or above quota when they're when the onboarding or ramp-up programs complete, and that to me is the single biggest challenge and the place of most impact for any sales and marketing executive out there. And speaking of process, I just talked about hiring process, but there's no question now in anybody's mind, whether it's, you mentioned Serious Decisions, CSO Insights, Forrester, Aberdeen. I mean, you just go down the list of the industry analysts out there. There's no question in anybody's mind that process works in selling, certainly in marketing as well. So we certainly recommend that VPs of sales and VPs of marketing audit the processes that they have, whether it's that closed loop lead generation process or whatever else it happens to be, qualification, who knows what, but audit it, look at the effectiveness of it. If it's broken, fix it or replace it. If there is no process where there should be, one has to be built. But we have to start running sales and marketing like the business that they are. And my concern over all these many years has been that more sales than marketing, it's in many cases, not all cases, maybe not half, but many cases, being run like a sports team, not like a business. And we have to get out of that mode. We have to run sales like a business. And the companies that do run it like a business have the performance statistics to bear out that that is the right way to do things.
You mentioned CSO Insights. I think the latest data that I've seen from them is in the low 60% of companies are making quota. That doesn't mean 60% of sales reps are not making quota or making quota, but it's, there are probably some outliers on the high end and the low end. Is there an optimal number? I mean, can companies hit 100% of their quota, or is the quota always set higher than what's really attainable?
Oh, so that's a good question, and the ability. Sometimes I think the ability to hit quota is directly proportional to the size and number of independent business units. I should say dependent business units. You may remember back years ago when Jack Welch was running General Electric, and it was just quite amazing that quarter after quarter after quarter, he'd meet Wall Street expectations nearly to the penny. So there's a lot of I don't want to suggest there was playing around, because I'm sure there wasn't, but there was let's say a little bit of financial freedom, and it's a little bit tougher. But no, I don't think that. I do think that companies set quotas higher. There are two basic ways to do that. One is by a board of directors saying, we need to do 15% more than we did last year because our competitors said they're doing 15%, and we have to be competitive. And then there are the other kinds of companies that build that up from the bottom. They take a look at market demand and previous history and addressable market and new products and services being introduced and the capabilities of the sales and marketing organization, and they use real intelligence, analytics and intelligence to roll up to this year or next year's quota number. But the most horrifying, and it is a business opportunity, I mean, this is what I do for a living, but the most horrifying thing is the number of people, VPs of sales, when I say to them, hey, Fred, Mary, what percentage of your salespeople sell 80% of your number? And of course, it's 20. That's very typically the answer of the people that come to us. And so that is entirely and completely unacceptable. What we want to see is 80% of the salespeople delivering 120% of the number. And that's really where we want to be. But of course, if they deliver 120% of the number, the next year the number is going to be 140% of the previous year. So that's what we live with in sales and marketing. I mean, that's just kind of part of our life.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, let me give you the last word. What have we missed in our conversation today? What's on your mind that we haven't talked about today?
Oh gosh, there are so many things. I guess just to reiterate about the business aspect of running a sales and marketing or sales organization and a marketing organization, and the importance of process. We know that 50%, 40 to 50% of salespeople wind up in sales as their third or fourth career, and they wound up in sales not because they're not smart. They may be very smart, but many of them wind up in sales because they're right-brained. They may not have been successful as an engineer or a lawyer or a doctor, so they wind up little by little moving toward a working environment where they can be more comfortable and use their intelligence and use their right brain tendencies, their intuition and charisma and all of that. And unfortunately, that doesn't lend well toward the increasingly more complex selling environments that we're in year by year. So I guess my final message is, back to the process question. We want pragmatic, flexible, in some cases non-linear process. But we need process, sales needs process, marketing needs process, and for those people who are listening who are afraid of it or concerned about it or who don't think it works, you're probably wrong. I'm willing to say that. And come to me, go read the literature out there, and hopefully you'll change your mind.
Well, perfect segue, Dave. How do folks get a hold of you if they want to learn more about your firm?
Well, esresearch.com, that's Echo Sierra for Effectiveness Solutions Research.com, my blog, esresearch.com/blog, and I'm Dave at esresearch.com, and just Google me, not David, but Dave.
Yep.
And I'm all over LinkedIn and Twitter and Google Plus and all those other places. So I welcome discussions, questions, queries, arguments, contention, whatever it is you want to dish out, I can handle it. So. All
right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for spending the time with me today. This is Dan McDade with PointClear signing off on another edition of PowerViews. Thank you for watching.